Hello and most welcome to 1622 of the series, and we continue in view of speaking to Rosen himself. Continue with dimensions of Apeiron, chapter 4. I think is especially suited, and we've begun with from space-time to time-space. That is page 138. The switching of gears is a shift into the coagula. In assuming this reverse posture, it becomes clear that being is indeed no mere point of departure for the stratospheric flights of the cogito. That is the whole embodied dimension from which the cogito first originates. We shall now attempt to sharpen our focus on Apeiron's dimensionality. In so doing, let us return to a matter of crucial significance, the question of space and time. We have found in the previous section that being is what first opens up the space in which objects are cast. And that this opening up is a presencing, making present. A making present, very good. To be present in the ontical sense is to be here at this point in space. But ontological presence also refers to now, to the present moment in time. In the posture that obscures being by reducing it to but a point of departure, time as well as space assumes a point-like character. When this occurs, time is apprehended as a mere sequence of extensionless nows. What happens to space and time with the ontological reversal that brings being to light? These dimensions take on a certain fullness or thickness. These dimensions take on a certain fullness or thickness. Heidegger explores the transformation in depth, particularly its temporal aspects. In his 1962 lecture, Time and Being, he speaks of ontologically thickened temporality as time-space or true time. According to Heidegger, far from being point-like, true time proves to be three-dimensional. Specifically, Heidegger tells us that behind the appearance of an extensionless point-like now is one, the past, which, though denied to us as a present, nevertheless makes its presence felt in its own way. 2. The future, which is withheld from us in its own peculiar manner of making itself present. And the present itself, presently present, as Heidegger referred to it in his earlier Anaximander meditation. Heidegger suggests that these three dimensions of time gather together and are held apart in every moment of lived experience. That is, they extend toward each other, yet since they never merely collapse into one another to form a monotonic unity, the space of their intimate interplay remains open. The three dimensions of time determine each other. There is a mutual giving to one another of future, past, and present. Quote, "The future being not yet present, at the same time gives and brings about what is no longer present, the past, and conversely what has been offers future to itself." The reciprocal relation of both gives and brings about the present. Thus, future, past, and present belong together in the way they offer themselves to one another. Heidegger next observes that with this presencing there opens up what we call space-time. But with the word time, we no longer mean the succession of a sequence of nows. Accordingly, time-space no longer means merely the distance between two now points of calculated time. Time-space now is the name for the openness which opens up in the mutual self-extending of futural approach, past and present. This openness exclusively and primarily provides the space in which space, as we usually know it, can unfold. The self-extending, the opening up of future, past and presence is itself pre-spatial. Only thus can it make room, that is, provide space. What Heidegger is saying is that while the dimensionality of time, thought as a succession of sequence of nows, is borrowed from the representation of three-dimensional space, when temporal dimensionality is thought in its truth as the threefold mutual giving, then it is three-dimensional space that derives from it. Expanding on this, Heidegger asserts what is germane to the time-space of true space, true time, consists in the mutual reaching out and opening up of future, past, and present. Accordingly, what we call dimension and dimensionality belongs to true time and to it alone. Dimensionality consists in reaching out, that opens up, in which futural approaching brings about what has been. What has been brings about future approaching, and the reciprocal relation of both brings about the opening up of openness. Thought in terms of this threefold giving, true time proves to be three-dimensional. Dimension, we repeat, is here thought not only as the area of possible measurement, but rather as reaching out throughout, as giving and opening up. Only the latter enables us to represent and delimit an area of measurement. Of course, the reaching throughout, giving and opening up, inherent in true time, is the action of being. To repeat, this action is pre-reflective. It takes place prior to the ontical activity of the subject with respect to its object once that subject has become detached. Therefore, to give the ontological difference its due, we must steadfastly avoid confusing the action of being with that of ontical reflection. I think that is incredibly important. So easily done. I've done it myself, so you can do it yourself. So be aware. And they sound scary similar. The former is what first makes the latter possible. So without an ontological difference, there won't be no reflection. It takes its start in the ontological, in being as such. I think that order is important also. Being comes always before beings. And it's not true to say that beings are derived from being, because the act of derivation is also in being. Cause and effect is in being. It is not being that causes the beings. Very, very. Underline that. Consonant with Heidegger's analysis of dimension is the notion of depth advanced by the phenomenological philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty. This idea provides us with a dialectical insight into dimensionality that, like Heideggerian thinking, permits us to understand the limits of classical space and to surpass them. By way of introducing Merleau-Ponty's depth dimension, let us consider once more the traditional dichotomy between objects contained in space and their spatial container, or as Plato put it, between that which becomes and that in which it becomes. A visible form becomes, whereas that in which it becomes is invisible and formless. Whatever changes may transpire in the objects that become, however they may be transformed, the containing space itself does not change. Indeed, for there to be a change, there must be difference, contrast, dialectical opposition of some kind. But the point elements that make up the classical continuum, rather than entailing opposition, involve mere juxtaposition. Unextended and thus devoid of inner structure, the elements of space possess no gradations of depth, no shading texture or nuance, no contrasts or distinctions of any sort. Instead of expressing the dialectical interplay of shadow and light, space itself is all light, as it were. A condition of total exposure prevails for the point elements of the continuum, since these elements, having no having no interior recesses, must be said to exist solely on the outside. We have some great takeaways here, and that is that the being is strictly pre-reflective. It precedes everything. It's the big before, and also that causality itself stems from there. It is not being that causes beings. It is before in the strictest possible sense ever. Absolute beforeness, if you like. Another important trait is reaching throughout, giving and opening up, inherent in true time, is the action of being. This action is pre-reflective. It is in the big before. And it's prior to the ontological activity of the subject with respect to its object, since that subject has become detached. It's the detachment between object and subject that happens in this process, going from the ontological to the ontic, so to speak. And the depth dimension is what gives the spatial container, that in which something becomes. And Plato put it very aptly, between that which becomes and that in which it becomes. But the point elements that make up the classical continuum, rather than entailing opposition, involve mere juxtaposition. It doesn't have an energy, the ontic field of the Newtonian space. Things are just juxtaposed, standing out there with any no opposition, no energy, no directedness, lacking all these. So Merleau-Ponty is opening up a fresh breeze, a clearing where things can exist. And I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.